Have you ever reached that point where you just say, I'm not doing this anymore? Not out of bitterness, but out of growth. That sacred moment where your spirit whispers, I'm choosing peace this time. That's not weakness talking. That's transformation, because when God starts elevating you, he'll start exposing distractions that can't go where you're going. And that's when you've got to train yourself to be unbothered. There comes a moment when you've cried enough tears, argued enough points, and chased enough validation to finally say, I'm done letting things shake me. That's the moment when growth begins. Because being unbothered isn't about pretending you don't care. It's about protecting what matters. It's about realizing that your peace is too expensive to spend on cheap drama. Your purpose too powerful to pause for petty things. You start to see that silence isn't weakness, it's wisdom. That walking away isn't defeat, it's direction. Life will always test your patience, your confidence, and your faith. People will talk, seasons will shift, and distractions will come dressed as opportunities. But when you've been through enough storms, you start learning the art of calm. You start realizing that you don't have to respond to everything sent to disrupt you. Sometimes your strength shows up in how gracefully you refuse to engage. You don't need to prove your peace. You just need to protect it. So this message is for the ones who feel misunderstood, drained, or constantly pulled into chaos. God is teaching you emotional discipline, not detachment. He's teaching you to stay centered while the world spins around you. Because when you train yourself to be unbothered, you step into a level of maturity, power, and peace that makes the enemy nervous and your destiny undeniable. Mastering your emotions is not about pretending you don't feel pain, anger, or disappointment. It's about learning how to process those feelings without letting them poison your purpose. It's about understanding that emotional maturity doesn't mean emotional suppression. It means emotional stewardship. When life throws you chaos, when people misunderstand you, when situations provoke you, the real test is not what happens to you, it's how you respond to it. There's a version of you that used to react to everything, that used to lose sleep over words that didn't deserve your energy, that used to break down every time someone didn't show up the way you expected. But growth teaches you that not everything requires your reaction. Not every offense requires your explanation, and not every storm requires your participation. When you start mastering your emotions, you start mastering your peace. And when you master your peace, you start mastering your destiny. The truth is, emotional control is a spiritual weapon because the enemy loves to play in your emotions. He thrives in your overreactions, in your assumptions, in your need to always respond. He wants you to take the bait, to get triggered, to let anger and frustration lead you away from your calling. But when you pause instead of reacting, when you breathe instead of breaking down, when you pray instead of posting, that's when heaven starts to move on your behalf. God can fight for you when you stop fighting everyone else. Mastering your emotions invites divine intervention because it's a sign that you trust God more than you trust your feelings. And trust me, your feelings will lie to you. They'll convince you that you're forgotten when you're actually being hidden for preparation. They'll tell you you're rejected when you're really being redirected. That's why you can't let your emotions lead your life. You've got to let your faith do that. Every time you choose peace over reaction, you're retraining your spirit. You're showing heaven that you're ready for more. Because greater levels require greater discipline. God can't elevate you into influence if your emotions are still easily manipulated. He can't put you in a position of power if you crumble under pressure. Mastering your emotions means learning how to feel deeply but respond wisely. And it means letting the Holy Spirit translate your pain into purpose instead of letting your frustration spill into foolishness. When you're unbothered, it doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care too much about your peace to hand it over carelessly. You start realizing that peace is not found in the absence of conflict, but in the presence of self-control. And that kind of peace is built through practice, through prayer, through patience. There are moments when you'll feel misunderstood and everything in you will want to defend yourself. But God is saying, let me handle it. Because when you master your emotions, you give God room to move in ways your words never could. There's power in restraint. There's freedom in not explaining yourself to everyone who misjudges you. The peace that comes from knowing who you are and whose you are is stronger than any rumor or misunderstand. You start to recognize that your value is not up for public debate. It's already been established by God. So instead of reacting to every false perception, you learn to stay grounded, to stay rooted, to stay silent, and let your fruit speak louder than your frustration. That's what emotional mastery looks like. It's walking with quiet authority, not because you're passive, but because you're powerful enough to choose calm over chaos. Think about Jesus in the storm. While the disciples were panicking, he was sleeping. That's emotional mastery. That's peace in motion. He wasn't unaware of the storm. He just knew who he was in it. When you truly know who you are in God, storms stop shaking you the same way. You start to understand that your emotions are indicators, not dictators. They can inform you, but they shouldn't control you. They're part of your humanity, but not the captain of your destiny. So when you feel that anger rise, when that disappointment hits, when that anxiety creeps in, pause and breathe. Ask yourself, is this emotion leading me closer to peace or pulling me away from it? That's how you start building spiritual awareness and emotional discipline. Mastering your emotions also means healing what triggers you. You can't control your reactions if you don't understand your wounds. Sometimes it's not what someone said that hurt you, it's what it reminded you of. It's the unhealed part of you that still flinches when touched. So God in his love allows certain people and moments to surface those emotions, not to break you, but to build you. He's not trying to expose your weakness. He's trying to strengthen your spirit. Emotional mastery comes from facing your pain head on, from letting God deal with those buried insecurities and fears. You can't conquer what you refuse to confront. And once you start healing, you stop bleeding on people who didn't cut you. You start showing up from a place of wholeness instead of woundedness. There's a peace that comes when you realize you don't owe anyone a reaction. You don't have to match their energy. You can keep yours holy. You don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. You don't have to explain your silence. People who misunderstand your calm will assume you're weak because they've never seen peace this powerful. But you're not shrinking. You're strengthening. You're learning that self-control is not just emotional intelligence, it's spiritual authority. Every time you choose to be still, you remind yourself that you are not a slave to your emotions. You are the steward of them. You manage them. You align them. You surrender them to God. And here's the truth. People who haven't mastered their emotions will always try to provoke yours. They'll test your patience, challenge your character, and question your boundaries. But don't let their chaos become your classroom. You don't need to defend your peace to those committed to misunderstanding it. The more you grow, the more you'll realize that the real power is in staying composed when everything is trying to pull you out of character. It's in knowing when to speak and when to stay silent, when to stand firm and when to walk away. That balance doesn't come overnight. It's a process. It's training. You fall, you react, you regret, and then you grow. Each time you pause before reacting, you strengthen that spiritual muscle. Each time you choose calm over conflict, you reinforce your peace. Emotional mastery is a lifestyle, not a moment. It's choosing to lead yourself before you try to lead others. It's learning that your peace is not dependent on circumstances, but anchored in God's presence. It's realizing that maturity isn't measured by how loud you can shout back, but by how softly you can stay still. When you can stand in the middle of chaos and still say, "It is well with my soul," that's when you've trained yourself to be unbothered. Not because life stopped being difficult, but because you stopped letting it define your inner world. You found stability in surrender. You found control through letting go. You found strength in stillness and clarity in calmness. And that's where your true power begins. Silence is a strategy, not a sign of weakness. It's one of the most powerful spiritual tools God gives you when you're learning how to rise above distraction. In a world that glorifies loudness, response, and reaction, silence becomes your secret weapon. Because the moment you stop explaining, defending, and arguing is the moment you start conserving your strength for what truly matters. The truth is, silence isn't emptiness. It's evidence of control. It's the posture of someone who understands that not everything deserves an answer and not every attack deserves attention. When you've been through enough storms, you learn that sometimes your stillness speaks louder than your defense. You learn that the real battle is not about proving your point, but about protecting your peace. There's a wisdom that grows in silence. It's in the quiet where God reveals what words could never explain. When you stop talking so much about what hurt you, you start hearing what God is trying to teach you. Silence creates room for discernment, and discernment is what keeps you from reacting emotionally to temporary situations, because sometimes what looks like an insult is really an invitation to rise higher, to move differently, to pray instead of post. Silence doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care enough to wait on divine timing. It means you trust that God can handle what your words cannot. You begin to see that not every season requires your voice. Some seasons require your observation, your stillness, your ability to listen more than you speak. When you stay quiet long enough, you start to see things more clearly, because peace gives you perspective. The enemy wants your reaction because that's where your power leaks. He'll use people, words, and situations to pull you out of your character. He knows that if he can get you to respond in your flesh, he can delay your progress in the spirit. But when you choose silence, you confuse him. When you refuse to be baited by gossip, when you decline to explain yourself to people who have already made up their minds, you break the cycle. You start living from a place of wisdom instead of woundedness. Silence protects you from saying what you can't take back. It keeps you from making emotional decisions that create spiritual consequences. It allows God to work behind the scenes while you rest in his sovereignty, because while you're quiet, he's speaking to hearts. While you're silent, he's shifting situations. Your silence is not weakness, it's partnership with heaven. There's power in learning when to be silent. Not every confrontation deserves closure. Not every misunderstanding needs correction. Sometimes the most mature thing you can do is keep still and let time reveal truth. Because truth doesn't need a microphone. It reveals itself. People may call you distant, cold, or proud because you're no longer explaining yourself, but that's only because they were used to your availability, not your boundaries. When you step into silence, you reclaim authority over your emotions and your energy. You stop being reactive and start being intentional. You start recognizing that your peace is worth more than your reputation. And in that quiet space, God starts to grow you in ways you didn't even know you needed. Silence also protects what God is building in you. There are seasons when God hides your progress because premature exposure can lead to unnecessary warfare. Sometimes he silences you to protect your seed. You can't share every idea, every revelation, every next move, because not everyone can handle the vision God gave you. Some people will try to talk you out of what they don't understand. Others will project their fears onto your faith. So God will train you to stay silent while he develops the promise in secret. You'll feel the urge to announce it, to prove it, to post it, but he'll whisper, "Be still." Because when it's real, you won't have to prove it. The fruit will speak for itself. Silence, in that sense, becomes an act of faith. It's saying, I don't need validation to know I'm growing. It's trusting that the right people will see your fruit when the season is right. There's a kind of strength that silence builds when you stop feeling the need to respond to everything. You start hearing the voice of God more clearly. You begin to understand that your peace isn't passive. It's powerful, because it takes power to hold your tongue when everything in you wants to clap back. It takes power to walk away when you know you could win the argument. It takes power to stay quiet and let God vindicate you in His time. That's not weakness. That's wisdom wrapped in restraint. And that restraint is what separates the called from the chosen. The called react. The chosen discern. The called argue for validation. The chosen rest in identity. Silence becomes the bridge between your emotions and your elevation. When you train yourself to be unbothered, silence becomes your sanctuary. You begin to find safety in it. You realize that you don't always need to explain why you're moving differently or why your circle got smaller. Silence becomes the proof that you're no longer controlled by the noise. It's the evidence that you've outgrown the need to prove your worth. Because the truth is, peace doesn't announce itself. It's felt. You don't have to convince anyone you've changed. Your calm will testify for you. You'll start walking into rooms with less to say but more to carry. You'll start showing up with quiet confidence that doesn't need to be loud to be powerful. Silence shifts the atmosphere before words ever do. There's also healing in silence. When you stop talking about what hurt you, you make space for God to heal it. When you stop repeating your pain, you stop rehearsing your trauma. Silence helps you release what you can't control. It allows your heart to rest from over-explanation and overthinking. You stop replaying the why and start trusting the what now. Silence gives you space to process instead of perform, to feel instead of defend, to sit with God instead of trying to make sense of everything. Sometimes the breakthrough doesn't come through talking. It comes through sitting still long enough for God to download new strength into your spirit. Silence also teaches you how to listen to God, to your intuition, to wisdom. When you're not constantly reacting, you start perceiving more. You begin to pick up on what's real versus what's distraction. You start hearing the subtle warnings of the Holy Spirit guiding you away from chaos and toward peace. You begin to see how certain conversations drain you, how certain atmospheres steal your energy, and how certain people test your boundary. Silence gives you clarity. It helps you separate noise from necessity. And in that clarity, you find direction. You realize that silence isn't the absence of communication, it's the presence of understanding. In a culture where everyone is trying to prove something, silence will make you stand out. People won't know how to read you because they can't predict your response. They'll expect you to react, but instead you'll remain still. They'll try to provoke you, but you'll smile and move forward. That's how you know you've grown. That's how you know you've been trained in the art of being unbothered. Because you no longer need to convince anyone of your peace, you're living it. Silence becomes your signature, your strength, your strategy. It's the sound of someone who has mastered themselves, who trusts God more than their need to be understood. And when you reach that place, silence stops being an escape and starts being empowerment. It becomes the space where you recharge, where you recalibrate, where you remember who you are and who's fighting for you. Because sometimes the loudest proof of your strength is found in what you choose not to say. Spiritual maturity means choosing peace over proving a point. It's the place where you stop needing to win every argument because you realize that peace is the greater victory. It's where you no longer waste energy trying to convince people who are determined not to understand you. You learn that not every disagreement deserves your defense, and not every misunderstanding deserves your clarification. Spiritual maturity is that quiet confidence that says God knows the truth, and that's enough. It's realizing that validation is temporary, but peace is eternal. When you reach that place, you stop chasing closure from people who can't comprehend your calling. You start valuing your inner calm more than your outer image. Because when your spirit matures, you don't need to be right, you just need to be aligned. Peace becomes your priority because you've learned the hard way that chaos is costly. Every time you try to prove yourself, you lose a little bit of your energy, your focus, your joy. You replay conversations in your mind. You write messages you'll never send. You carry tension that was never yours to hold. But when God grows you, he teaches you that peace is not found in getting the last word. It's found in letting go of the need to have one. You start recognizing that silence and surrender are not signs of weakness. They're signs of wisdom. Because peace requires power. It takes strength to walk away. It takes discipline to hold your tongue. And it takes faith to trust that God will fight your battles while you rest in his will. Spiritual maturity means you no longer react to every trigger. You pray through it, breathe through it, and grow through it. There comes a time when you stop explaining your heart to people who only listen to respond. You realize that no matter how many times you tell your truth, some people will still twist it. So instead of trying to be understood, you focus on being at peace. That's when your spirit matures, when you stop needing to be seen and start focusing on being settled. You understand that people's opinions are reflections of their perspective, not your worth. You don't have to convince anyone of your character when God has already approved it. The old you would have argued to be right, but the healed you understands that rightness doesn't always bring righteousness. Sometimes peace means walking away without explanation and trusting that time will reveal what truth already knows. Spiritual maturity shifts your focus from reaction to reflection. You stop asking, how can I make them see? And start asking, what is God showing me? You start to see how God uses misunderstanding to humble you, betrayal to redirect you, and silence to strengthen you. You start realizing that not every loss is punishment. Sometimes it's protection. Not every closed door is rejection. Sometimes it's redirection. The mature spirit doesn't panic when things fall apart. It pauses and prays. It understands that peace doesn't come from perfection, but from perspective. You stop trying to control the narrative and start trusting the author. You realize that peace is not the absence of trouble. It's the presence of trust. And that kind of peace can't be stolen by opinions, circumstances, or confusion. The deeper you go in your walk with God, the less you crave attention and the more you crave alignment. You stop chasing applause and start chasing authenticity. You understand that proving a point may win a moment, but protecting your peace wins your future. Maturity teaches you that peace is the fruit of discernment, knowing when to speak, when to listen, when to fight, and when to let God handle it. You learn that not everything deserves your response because not everything is worth losing your peace over. And that's not arrogance, that's awareness. You've learned that your energy is sacred and your peace is part of your protection. You can't carry purpose and pettiness at the same time, so you choose the higher road, not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. There's a calm that comes with knowing who you are in God. When your identity is anchored in Him, you stop reacting to what's beneath you. You stop explaining your growth to people still committed to misunderstanding it. You stop lowering your voice just to be accepted in rooms you've outgrown. Spiritual maturity means walking in peace even when others try to provoke chaos. It means smiling when they expect you to crumble, staying kind when they expect you to snap, and praying for those who try to destroy you. You stop fighting to prove your purity because your fruit speaks for itself. That's the quiet strength of a mature spirit. Doesn't need to announce what God is already proving. When you choose peace over proving a point, you protect your purpose from contamination. Every argument, every conflict, every emotional tug of war drains the energy you need for what God has called you to do. That's why maturity teaches you the art of redirection, when to walk away from distraction and stay focused on destiny. You realize that your assignment is too important to get caught up in unnecessary battles. You stop engaging with every critic because you understand that not everyone has earned access to your attention. The more you grow, the more you recognize that silence and peace are not retreats, they're strategies. You're not running from the battle, you're choosing which ones are worth your fight. Spiritual maturity will test you in moments when your ego screams for response, but your peace whispers, be still. It will stretch you when you want to clap back, when you want to defend yourself, when you want to prove you're right. But in those moments, God is teaching you that peace is protection. He's teaching you that you don't have to fight for what's already yours. The mature spirit knows that time will reveal truth, and truth doesn't need a spokesperson. Sometimes the most powerful statement you can make is to stay silent and keep moving. Because when you stop trying to prove your worth, you make space for God to prove his faithfulness. Your peace becomes your testimony. Your calm becomes your crown. There's also a spiritual elevation that comes from peace. When you stop reacting to everything, your discernment sharpens. You start hearing God's voice more clearly because your spirit is no longer clouded by noise. You start recognizing divine patterns in the chaos, seeing lessons in the loss, and finding purpose in the pain. That's when you know you've grown. Because maturity isn't about how much you know, it's about how much you can let go. You let go of the need to explain, to fix, to prove. You trust that whatever is meant for you can't be stolen, and whatever is not meant for you can't be forced. You live lighter, you love deeper, you move wiser, and that peace begins to surround you like armor. Choosing peace over proving a point doesn't mean you don't care. It means you've learned to care correctly. You've learned that you can control how people see you, but you can control how you show up. You can't make them understand your heart, but you can make sure your heart stays pure. You can't make them like you, but you can keep walking in love. Maturity is realizing that you're not responsible for their perception. You're responsible for your peace. So you stop showing up to battles that don't serve your growth. You stop defending yourself in spaces where God has already declared your victory. You stop trying to make people see your light and start focusing on shining it anyway. Peace becomes your proof that God is working in you. It's the evidence of transformation. It's the calm after the storm that used to shake you. It's the confidence to say, I don't need to be right to be whole. You no longer let small things steal your serenity. You no longer chase closure from chaos. You've learned that silence and peace are the language of power, because when your spirit is mature, you don't need to prove you're blessed. The peace you carry says it all. That's what growth looks like. That's what freedom feels like. It's when you've finally learned that sometimes the loudest proof of your strength is found in the quiet choice to simply stay at peace. You see, the real victory was never about proving a point. It was about preserving your peace. The enemy wanted your reaction, but God wanted your restraint, because when you can stand in the middle of misunderstanding and still choose peace, that's when you show the world what true power looks like. You're not reacting anymore. You're responding with wisdom. You're not chasing approval. You're walking in assurance. You're not fighting battles God already won. You're resting in his promise. That's what it means to be trained, to be refined, to be unbothered. Every time you stay calm when chaos rises, heaven celebrates your growth. Every time you choose peace over pride, silence over shouting, purpose over pettiness, you're becoming more like the person God always designed you to be. You're no longer ruled by emotion, but led by discernment. You're no longer begging for clarity from people who can't comprehend your calling. You've learned that your peace is not up for negotiation. It's your spiritual inheritance. And when you guard it, you guard your destiny. So from this moment forward, walk with that quiet strength. Let the world spin while you stay centered. Let them talk while you stay focused. Let them question while you keep glowing. Because when you train yourself to be unbothered, you're not just protecting your peace, you're protecting your power. You're moving with heaven's rhythm now. And that kind of peace, it can't be faked, it can't be shaken, and it can't be stolen. You are covered, you are calm, and you are called.